Welcome back to this Tuesday edition of Focal Point on AFR Talk. You are listening to Focal Point High Definition Radio. More content per cubic inch of air than any other place on your radio dial. Jeb Bush out there in Arizona today calling for amnesty. So for conservatives for whom secure borders, rule of law is important, Jeb Bush is out there hacking and flacking for amnesty. That's information, ladies and gentlemen, we're passing on to you so that you are an informed voter. You need to know as we head into primary season that Jeb Bush is a big-time supporter of amnesty. Now let's grab one last call before we go into the lightning round. Got a lot of content want to give you this section. Let's go to Don in Illinois. Don, welcome. What's on your mind?
Well, I'd like to make a statement. You know that they've been trying to get Sharia law in America. Well, those people that are, there's the gay agenda and those abortionist people better hope to heaven's sakes that never happens. Because this is an abomination to our nation, and God is not going to just stand back and let this happen. I mean, all these things that's happening right now, he's not going to let it happen. I mean, he's not. And I think our president and all the people that, I think they're all that way, is my opinion, So if we get Sharia law, they're in trouble.
Yeah. So you think that our president would be in trouble if we had Sharia law, or you think he supports Sharia law?
I think he would be too, because I once thought he was a Muslim, but I don't think so now, because they wouldn't even want him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they wouldn't even accept him,
Well, it's interesting, Don, and I entirely agree with you about Sharia law. This is something that I believe has got to be stopped. It's fundamentally un-American. It's fundamentally anti-American. Had a story in the stack yesterday didn't get to, but one of the differences between a Christian nation and a Muslim nation is in the United States. In a Christian nation, you don't get away with an honor killing. We had an Iraqi man killed his wife in Southern California because she was going to divorce him, and tried to manufacture a hate crime, try to make it look like a hate crime. But he got apprehended, he got convicted, and he's going to go to prison for the rest of his life for an honor killing. Now, in Muslim countries, you get away with that. But in a Christian nation, you do not. That's legitimate under Sharia law. Have honor killings all the time. 91% of all the honor killings in the world are done in Muslim countries, done by Muslims. Does not happen in a Christian country. That's one of the reasons why we cannot allow Sharia law into this country. I was talking, thank you, Don, for the call. I appreciate it. I was talking to somebody in my church who lived in the UK, was a missionary in the UK for many years. And he says, we've got Sharia law, and we've talked about it before here. We've got Sharia law right there in London. I mean, it's there. There are 85 Sharia law courts in London, 85 courts that are just for Muslims, and all the decisions are rendered according to Sharia law. He says you've got a lot of places in London that are no-go places where ordinary people just don't go because you may not come out of there alive. If you have a fender bender there, you're not going to stop and try to get insurance. You're going to get out of there as fast as you can. So that's what happens when you get Sharia law. Now let's play a couple of quick sound bites. This is the lightning round, so we're going to pack you with information. This is Megan McArdle, clips 3 and 4. Megan McArdle, great writer on economics, great writer on healthcare. She's written a book about the role of failure in American history. She calls it the upside of down. And basically her point is, if you look at American history, what you see is you see one failure after another. All of the prominent figures in American history knew failure at one point in their lives. But failure was, they picked themselves up. Remember, we saw that in the Proverbs. The righteous man, he falls down 7 times. What does he do? He gets up 7 times. So failure is not a barrier to a righteous man. It's an incentive to pick himself up, dust himself off, and make a fresh effort. And so she says the upside of down, a lot of times failure is the very thing that positions us and conditions us for success. Here is clip number 1.
It's in all of our stories, right? It's in the canonical stories of America. It's in, everything from Washington's despair at Valley Forge to Thomas Jefferson, who at the end of his life almost went bankrupt. And in fact, one thing that you see in the Constitution is that the government is empowered to create a bankruptcy code, which was really novel at the time, and because these guys often had terrible debts that they weren't sure they could pay. Go on to Mark Twain, who was a serial failure. He tried so many jobs, finally got into writing because the Mississippi steamboat trade had been shut down. He was famously a steamboat pilot, and then he tried his hand at all sorts of things, including mining. And when that finally all played out, he
tried the
fell back
newspaper
on
business.
writing.
Yeah. And in fact, if it weren't for his failed investments in the typesetting business, we never would have gotten his wonderful lecture tour.
Yes, indeed. He wanted to be a businessman. It was a time when people really admired businessmen. He wanted to get rich. And so he went into the publishing business, and he actually did okay in the publishing business, but he did really, really badly at an attempt to invent a typesetting machine. And so when that went under, it took the whole publishing house and all of his personal finances with it.
So I was saying, even Mark Twain, we wouldn't have the great novels that he wrote. I mean, Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer, considered the greatest American novels ever written. We wouldn't have those if Mark Twain hadn't been a miserable, abject failure in business. You know, I've often said, looking back at the course of my life, that the best answers to prayer I have ever gotten have been no. The best answer to prayer that I have ever gotten in my life has been when God has said no. I didn't understand it at the time. I didn't see it at the time. But God says, no, I'm going to close this door in front of you. It looks, there's no reason in your judgment why that wouldn't be a door I should open. You think it's good for you. You think there are wonders on the other side of that door. I know better than you. I'm shutting that door right in your face because I've got another plan for you. And closing this door in front of you is the way I'm going to position you to be ready for the opportunity that I have for you. So Megan McArdle says, look, this is part of the American experiment. Failure has had a fundamental role to play in moving America forward because there's something about the American spirit, and I believe it's because we are a Christian nation. That spirit of perseverance, that spirit of hope just infuses us. We're not going to take no for a negative. We're not going to quit. We're going to fall down 7 times. We're going to pick ourselves back up, and we're going to just keep right on moving. We understand that adversity has a role to purify us. That's how they purified silver, is through heat. That causes the impurities to rise to the surface. You skim them off, and pretty soon you can see your reflection in the silver. In the crucible, that's what God is doing with us through adversity. We experience adversity. The heat causes the impurities in our character and personality to rise to the surface. God can skim them off. And eventually, over time, he begins to see his own reflection then in the silver. Here is clip number 4, the second of the 2 Megan McArdle clips. And the interviewer says, look, you've convinced us that we all have failure in our DNA. Why has this led to greatness in America?
Well, in part because freedom can be just another word for nothing left to lose, right? When you don't have anything, I'm not saying it's all, beer and Skittles. However, it does open up the path because you have so little to lose. You can try things that other people might not dare. But the other thing is that it's not just enough to take risks or to let things fail. It's good that we don't bail out big industrial concerns that go under, usually.
Well, we used to not, yeah.
But it's just as important what happens after people have failed. Are they resilient? Do they pick themselves up and try again? And does the system that they're in, the family, the corporation, the government, encourage them to do that, to move on from what wasn't working and start over with some new thing that has a better shot at working out?
Well, I guess we're also the land of the second chance, and that's what makes a big difference.
We really are. And
I believe we are the land of the second chance. And I think the reason for this is because we are a Christian nation. It is because of the influence of Christianity that we believe in second chances, that we believe in redemption, that we believe that failure is not the end of the story. I want you to think for just a minute about the number of stories in the Bible, prominent figures in the Bible, where failure was the prelude to success. I used to tell my kids all the time, there may be a lot of reasons for you not to do something, but fear should never be one of them, because fear is just a fear of failure, a fear of looking bad. But there is no great thing that has ever been accomplished that was not accomplished in the presence of the possibility of abject failure. In other words, if there isn't the possibility of some kind of epic failure, there's no possibility of epic success. Those things go hand in hand, and part of faith is meeting that fear. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's the presence of faith, where I pick myself up. I look at this obstacle in front of me. I know I could fail, but I'm going to give it my best shot. And you think about Joseph. I think about Joseph. He was dumped in a pit by his brothers. Then he was sold into slavery. Then he was falsely accused of sexual assault, and he was dumped in prison where he was forgotten. And yet he rose to become the second in command to the greatest and most powerful ruler in all the world. You think about Moses. Moses thought the time had come for him to step into leadership. He thought that his fellow Israelites would understand that God had raised him up for this moment. A total, absolute failure. Murders a guy, has to run for his life. Spends 40 years on the backside of the desert, but God had a plan. Used that time to prepare him for the plan that he had for his life. You think about Jonah. I think what my favorite verse in all the Bible is? My favorite verse in all the Bible is Jonah 3, chapter 3, verse 1. The word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. In other words, God gave him his word in Jonah 1, said, I want you to go to Nineveh. Jonah immediately got on a boat and went as fast as he could the complete opposite direction, got swallowed by the giant fish, has a come to Jesus moment in the belly of the fish. The fish vomits him out. And what does it say? God wasn't done with him. The word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. And you think about Peter. What a spectacular meltdown. 3 times denies the Lord just after promising him that he would lay down his life for him. And Jesus picks him up, dusts him off 3 times. Peter, do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know I do. Feed my sheep. 3 times he says that, just like taking an eraser to this big whiteboard, and every one of Peter's denials erased from the board by the grace and forgiveness of Christ, picks him up, puts him on his feet, dusts him off, and he becomes then the leader of the church, the one on whom the Church of Christ was built in the early years. So failure, not the back door to success, it is the front door to success. Bow low before God, stand tall before God, and never forget we are fighting a winnable war. See you tomorrow.